Once you've grown as a nonprofit organization, how do you keep up the momentum and keep scaling your impact? In this video, I'm going to share 10 areas of focus for you to think about as you are at this stage in your nonprofit's life cycle. I'm Amber Melanie Smith. I'm a nonprofit founder, social entrepreneur, and social impact YouTuber. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, I make videos all about creating a social impact, whether that's through starting a nonprofit or social enterprise, socially conscious business, or other ways to make an impact. So check out my other videos on these topics and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my Changemaker newsletter. The link to subscribe is below this video, but I send out tips and strategies for social impact, as well as sometimes funding opportunities that I come across. So you don't want to miss that. Subscribe with the link below and get some extra content and support from me in your journey. In this video, we're going to talk about what are some of the most important things to focus on when you're in a more established phase as a nonprofit. In a recent video, I talked about the nonprofit life cycle. So this is sort of a branch off of that topic, going a little bit more in depth into what you really want to be doing to strategize and scale your impact at this stage. Now, if you're a newer or smaller nonprofit, this information can still be useful to you because it can help you really think ahead to when you get to this stage. All right, so leaders in this phase of a nonprofit organization, this established phase, are going to face a unique set of challenges that we're going to talk about. And I've broken these challenges into 3 overarching categories that will frame how we talk about them. And they are programming, fundraising, and leadership. So let's get into the first set of challenges specifically related, in this case, to programming. The first focus area in programming that you want to have as a more established organization is impact measurement and reporting. Hopefully, some of these systems to measure your impact were set up in earlier stages of your organization, in the startup phase or as you're growing. But here is where you really want to continuously evaluate the effectiveness of your programs. Maybe you had programs that were effective when they first started, but as we know, the world changes constantly and things that might have worked before might not work in the future. So you want to have those feedback mechanisms set up so that you're continuously able to collect data on how your programs are making an impact for the communities that you want to serve. You also want to make sure that you are communicating your impact regularly and consistently with your audiences. This could be anything from sharing how many people you served or in what ways you served them, or testimonials from the people that you served, or good feedback with your audience in newsletters or email or social media or video content. Just making sure that you are regularly sharing these impacts, because that helps people keep your organization top of mind. Having this data also makes sure that you can ensure that your programs are going to be effective as the world around you changes. And this is really important because at any point in your organization's life, you need to be able to have the humility and wherewithal to look at a program if it's not working and be able to figure out how to pivot, or even worst case scenario, close that program down and try something new, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's about serving your community the best way you can. The second focus area at this stage is partnerships and collaborations. At this stage of the organization, you should have a really good sense of your identity, your brand, your mission, and your vision, which makes really good positioning for partnerships, because it's easiest to partner and collaborate with other entities when you're super clear on who you are and what you need out of a partnership. So at this stage, you should be thinking outside of the box on what other institutions, whether that's other nonprofits or government agencies, or maybe even businesses or civic clubs, what other institutions should your organization be partnering with and how, in order to expand the impact of your programming? What do you need from someone else's organization, and what can you provide them in exchange to make for a mutually beneficial partnership? The third focus area is innovation and adaptation. And this sort of goes back to what I was saying in number 1 about being able to take an honest look at your programs. But as I was saying, the world is constantly changing, and this necessitates your nonprofit evolving as the world evolves too. Organizations that didn't innovate and weren't adaptable, many of them did not survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Who knows what other things could happen in the world that could provide external threats to our missions. It's really important to be innovative and adaptable. And here's one way you can do that. You want to make sure that a culture of innovation is really prevalent throughout your entire team, whether that's your board of directors, your staff, the whole entity, everyone who makes up the internal engine of your nonprofit. You want to celebrate new ideas, reward people on the team for thinking outside the box, and give people an opportunity to try new things and give them a chance to fail or succeed without harsh consequences. A fourth focus area for nonprofits in this phase is advocacy and looking at the systems that your nonprofit's work are a part of. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say you are a food insecurity nonprofit and you provide meals to people. At this stage, you want to be asking yourself, what more can you do to prevent and stop hunger at the root so that you maybe one day don't have to provide meals for everyone? What are the things that you can work to change on a policy level or on a systems level as a nonprofit so that hunger just isn't an issue anymore in this example? I've talked about this idea of charity versus systemic change in past videos, but just to recap, charity is serving the needs of people day to day, like feeding someone, and systemic change is working to change the systems that perpetuate hunger so that nobody has to have food provided for them. It's just already available in the future. This goes back to the Desmond Tutu quote of, there comes a point where you have to stop seeing people coming down the river and go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place. I really botched that, but that's basically the summary of the quote. All right, so those are some of the things you want to focus on in the program umbrella. Next, we're going to talk about some things you want to focus on under the fundraising umbrella. Focus area number 5 in the whole list is diversifying funding streams. When you are starting up or in a growth phase, sometimes you might have gotten your start relying on one major source of funding. Maybe you got really lucky and got a grant, or a major donor seeded the launch of your nonprofit or something like that. But if you're going to be, sustainable for the long term, you really have to have a diverse pool of funding that you can rely on in the event one funding stream falls short. I know this happened to a lot of organizations, for example, during the pandemic. If they were relying, for example, let's say on corporate support, but then all the companies stopped giving because they needed to tighten their belts because they were in a pandemic too, then what happened to all that money to the nonprofits? So just one hypothetical example. But this is something you really want to focus on. Considering all the avenues for generating revenue. It could be individual donors and major gifts. It could be earned income, which is something I've talked about in other videos too. Grants, government contracts. There's no one size fits all for every nonprofit. Each nonprofit has to think about how their mission is best suited to different revenue models and match them up to find the best fit for them. As you're thinking about how you might diversify your funding streams, you really want to make sure you have solid systems in place to do things like track your donations, track your revenue, do your budgeting and accounting, etc. So this is a really great segue to talk about this video's sponsor, Argenta software. I've said this about Argenta in past videos, but as someone who has had to manage various nonprofit functions in multiple types of software before, I really appreciate how their solution really does everything. It's an all-in-one solution that can help you manage donors, plan fundraising events, do your accounting, manage your staff, and honestly, a lot more. You can even use their forms feature to collect donations through your nonprofit's website. And it's really easy to get started and subscribe to use the software. I was able to create an account and get started exploring the system and all of its features pretty quickly. So as you're exploring new potential donor audiences and fundraising mechanisms to include in your fundraising strategy, you could use Argenta software to do everything from planning and facilitating ticket sales for fundraising events, running auction fundraisers, creating a grant application calendar, producing reports to track and analyze your fundraising data and successes, and more. So I definitely recommend checking Argenta out. You can get a demo, have a conversation with the Argenta team. They are super friendly, very human. I've really enjoyed my time getting to know them, and they're really invested in making sure that nonprofits can succeed. So go check them out. I will leave the link to learn more about them below this video. The sixth key focus area for established organizations is really doubling down on your financial management systems and sustainability. What that looks like is making sure that you have really solid accounting policies and processes. You've got your software all set up. You've got your internal controls processes, which is basically the steps that your team takes to deposit a check and make sure that money doesn't go missing and stuff like that. Basically holding the team accountable for financial management. It's just really good accounting practice and sometimes is required for certain laws and grants. So definitely something you want to have in place. Making sure that you have a budget review process, that you're checking on your expenses regularly, you're providing financial reports to your board that are accurate and up to date. And then another thing is to consider your operating reserve policy at this time. So this is basically like having a savings account for your nonprofit. You can put money aside into a rainy day fund to protect your organization in the event of having to face an emergency or having a sudden dip in your revenue. The final category of things you want to focus on at this stage is related to your leadership. So this is your staff and board leadership. So I'm going to go through the final 4 key focus areas that fall under this umbrella. Number 7 is to strengthen board governance and leadership. At this stage, you want to make sure that you have really strong board processes and management in place. Everything from having a clear and strategic way to recruit new board members as board members cycle off of your board of directors, making sure you're assessing for the skills and talents you need at that time, to making sure that your board is representative of the community. It's diverse. You've got lots of skills. You've got lots of demographics represented on your board, and that they're also very engaged in the board in the ways that they should be at this stage in the organization. If you have staff already in place doing the day-to-day operations, then you might have what's called a governing board, which means that your board is focused on high-level strategy, governance, and oversight, but they're doing less of the day-to-day activities that now staff are responsible for. So making sure you have that clear delineation of duties and collaboration as well. Number 8 has to do with strategic planning and goal setting for the organization. Every couple of years, your organization's leadership should be doing some kind of strategic planning process where you're looking at the external factors impacting your organization, from the economy to things going on in your local community, to whatever those things might be that might have an impact on how your organization can operate and sustain itself, all the way to your internal challenges and strengths as well. Maybe you have really strong programming, but your accounting needs to be tightened up, things like that. So the strategic planning is more big picture, high level. Where do you want to be in the next couple of years, and what are the top goals that you're going to be working towards to get there? But then each year you also want to have a tactical plan to help you map out the steps to get to that bigger picture strategic plan. So you want to basically have ways that you're measuring the ongoing success of your organization. Let's say one year you decide that the number of people you feed is the most important metric that you want to measure, but then you're doing really well in that, so now you want to focus on something else for the next year. And maybe so the next year you focus on how many people report that they don't need your services anymore because now they are self-sustaining and they don't need your food insecurity support anymore. Just different ways of looking at that. But basically, what are those smaller goals each year that you can monitor throughout a year? That's going to basically be the stepping stones to reach those bigger picture strategic goals that you have set for the couple of year period. Number 9 is so important, and it is staff development and retention. Staff turnover is a real issue in the nonprofit world, and it can be damaging to an organization's finances and programs and operations. So in an ideal world, we are retaining our staff and they are happy and well taken care of so that there's no disruptions to our mission. What does it look like to make sure you have strong staff development and retention practices in place? Well, you want to make sure that you're offering competitive salaries to the market. You want to make sure that your staff have good benefits, that they're happy with the organizational work culture, that they feel close and connected to your mission and each other on the team. These are all part of culture and making sure that your organization is a good place to work, but also development, which means making sure they have opportunities to learn and train and grow their skills and their knowledge, especially because some of them might be thinking of how can they grow and take on new leadership positions in the organization as the organization itself grows. Maybe one day they want to be a manager or a director. So preparing them and giving them the tools to work towards that future goal is important. Number 10 is resilience, and it's all about setting up policies, processes, and procedures to make sure your organization can survive various crises. This could mean putting a written succession plan in place. What happens if your executive director leaves one day or something happens to them? Who takes over? What does that look like? Do you hire someone new? All of these questions are things you need to think through with your organization. What happens if a crisis happens? So you need to have a crisis management plan. What about risk assessment? What are the potential threats to the organization and how would you mitigate them if they came up? Just having the time to have these conversations with your board and your staff so that you can have a plan for if these things ever happen is going to make your organization stronger for the long term. If I had to give one theme to this entire list, it would be adaptability, because you don't want to rest on your laurels if you are an established nonprofit. The world is constantly changing, and if you don't change with it, you could risk becoming obsolete or losing your support or not being relevant anymore to the community, and you want to avoid those things, of course. I'd love to hear from you. Do you think you're at this stage or working towards this stage? What are some of your questions or concerns that came out of listening to these key focus areas? Share those thoughts in the comments below. If you are in the startup phase and you are trying to think about how to create a sustainable fundraising plan, you definitely want to check out my website, foundertofulltime.com, because I have resources there on how to start a nonprofit, how to develop a sustainable fundraising plan. I have some online courses, I have some articles. Check those out. I hope those are useful to you. And my newsletter that I mentioned earlier, don't forget, I'll leave that link below, but come join me on there, subscribe. And finally, a Facebook group that I have is called Change the World or Bust. We have thousands of people in there who are all trying to make a social impact just like you, and I hope you can join us there and join our community. That's all I have for you today. I'm Amber Melanie Smith, and I will see you next time.